Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a hard look at ISO 14001:2026 and decoding how to actually transform your environmental management from a purely theoretical framework into a lived, fully audit-proof reality. Look, if your EMS feels like an endless mountain of paperwork right now, you're absolutely in the right place. We're going to move you from a static paper policy to everyday practice.
Okay, let's dive right into the core challenge here. The most common pitfall organizations face is treating their environmental policy like a symbolic compliance document. So we're going to focus on ensuring your policy actively bridges that gap between your internal operational culture and your external stakeholder transparency. It's all about making sure your policy isn't just a PDF gathering dust on some shared drive, but a true, living reflection of how you do business.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we're defining your EMS boundaries. Second, the core environmental policy. Third, driving internal staff awareness. Fourth, external transparency and access. Fifth, assigning roles and accountability. And finally, setting measurable environmental objectives.
All right, Section 1, defining your EMS boundaries and establishing the scope.
Now, it goes without saying, you cannot manage what you haven't defined. Defining your EMS scope is a highly strategic activity, and it absolutely must reflect your real-world environmental realities. For example, a chemical plant can't just draw a box around their administrative offices and call it a day, right? Their scope has to comprehensively cover air emissions, hazardous waste, and distribution. It establishes absolute clarity on exactly which activities and locations are included.
Let's look at this through an auditor's lens for a second. Lead auditors will heavily penalize you for artificially excluding high-polluting areas just to make compliance easier on yourselves. Omitting things like temporary construction sites or excluding a high-impact warehouse simply because it's run by a third-party logistics provider, those are major red flags. Your scope literally has to represent your true environmental footprint. No shortcuts.
Moving on to Section 2, the core environmental policy. And we're talking about moving way beyond generic statements here.
So at the beating heart of your entire system is the environmental policy itself. And let's be clear, this cannot just be generic sustainability fluff like, we care about the Earth. To actually meet ISO requirements, this needs to be a foundational control instrument. It must explicitly commit to environmental protection, pollution prevention, legal compliance, and continual improvement, all based on your actual real-world operational risks.
Which brings us to Sections 3 and 4, the tale of two audiences. Specifically, internal awareness versus external transparency.
Now, a policy is practically useless if it's kept a secret. Imagine an internal employee training session and a public-facing corporate sustainability website simultaneously displaying your organization's environmental policy. This is exactly what you want. An internal operator learning about waste reduction on the factory floor must be guided by the exact same commitments that a community member, a regulator, or an investor reads about online. This ensures total alignment inside and out.
To actually make this a reality, leadership has to take 3 practical steps. Step 1, draft a context-specific policy. Step 2, integrate it deeply into internal staff training and daily reminders. And Step 3, publish it for external stakeholders across your websites and community meetings. Transparency builds trust externally, while internal awareness drives the actual action on the ground.
Next up, Section 5, assigning roles and accountability. Essentially, who does what?
Well, a policy obviously needs people to execute it. True environmental performance relies on deep integration across the board. Accountability cannot just be the job of the EHS manager sitting alone in an office somewhere. Procurement needs to buy sustainably. Logistics needs to optimize fuel. Maintenance needs to actively prevent leaks. Every single function requires formally documented responsibilities. It's a team effort. Because think about it, if a lead auditor interviews your floor staff and they are completely oblivious to their environmental obligations, you are looking at a major structural nonconformance. Auditors actively look for informal role assignments and unclear reporting channels. If the responsibilities aren't written down in job descriptions, tracked in competence frameworks, or actually understood by the folks doing the work, the system is fundamentally broken. Communicating these roles is just non-negotiable.
All right, Section 6, setting measurable environmental objectives, transforming from policy into action.
This right here is where the rubber really meets the road. If a logistics company commits to climate change mitigation, they can't just vaguely say they're going to do better.
They need a hard, measurable target, like achieving a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by a very specific date. That target is then driven by tangible, real-world controls, like implementing routing software and strict fuel tracking.
To make those targets a reality, the ISO 14001:2026 standard requires incredibly detailed action plans. You literally have to document plans answering 4 exact questions. What needs to be achieved? Who is responsible for it? How exactly will it be implemented, meaning what resources and operational changes are actually needed? And when are the results expected? Answering these proves to your auditors that your objectives aren't just wishful thinking, but are actually achievable and strategically resourced. Ultimately, effective environmental management all comes down to engaged leadership. As the standard makes perfectly clear, top management cannot simply delegate their accountability away. They have to set the tone, provide the necessary resources, and actively review performance data to ensure the entire system is actually working the way it's supposed to.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself one final, absolutely critical question. Is your EMS truly integrated into your business strategy? Take a hard look at whether your system is genuinely built for sustainable impact, driven by measurable objectives and a widely understood policy, or if it's just symbolic compliance designed to barely pass an audit. The leap from paper to practice requires real commitment at every single level. So, what's it going to be? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today.